I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
That's almost what I call gangster-type politics. The politics of retribution, politics of revenge.
Their reign is over. Their reign will be over.
Mr. Trump has practiced the big lie for 5 decades, and it works for him.
I actually think we won most of the country.
He represents a dark force in humanity.
I don't know anyone who loves their country more and is more patriotic than the president. He talks directly with the American people, which is fantastic.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
Real estate shark, reality TV star, former United States president, now convicted criminal.
And I obliterate my competition.
There has never been an American iconoclast like Donald Trump.
That way, they're Republicans. I said, I don't give a shit.
The American people are going to see a great era of well-being and peace and prosperity.
Millions and millions of people.
It's just a once-in-a-generational chance to have the American people have a voice back in their own government.
He's a fucking idiot. He's just a fucking idiot.
Nearly 4 years on from the carnage at the Capitol, the man accused of encouraging his fellow citizens to assault their own democracy is back.
Look at what's happened with the J6 hostages, the hostages. We will give them pardons.
I do worry there's a real group of American citizens who are willing to engage in violence for Donald Trump.
Take a look at what happened.
Already, there's been violence, but it's been aimed at Donald Trump. A would-be assassin coming close to killing the former president. For months before this moment, Four Corners was investigating what a second Trump presidency would mean for America and the world. It's even more relevant now after this, with the defiant Donald Trump looking unstoppable in his march to the White House. In Donald Trump's vision for America, centuries-old institutions are there to be dismantled, and the checks and balances established by the Founding Fathers are impediments to absolute power.
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
So when he says he's a dictator for a day, he really means, look, I want to be dictator for life.
We're in the midst of a neo-Marxist revolution here in the United States, and we have to wake up to what's going on.
We pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
He hates political correctness, and he loves America.
We'll do anything possible.
America's broke. I'm going to fix it, and I love it.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen.
After the chaos and confusion of his first term in office, Donald Trump has a detailed plan for his second coming. It involves reshaping the very pillars of American democracy. And there's already an army of loyal recruits who are prepared to carry out his orders.
We have a database with over 10,000 people from all walks of life. But we want people who've been canceled, who've figuratively given blood for the movement.
They want to bring shock troops into the government who focus on dismantling government.
If you're not on board with the president's agenda and you're in a consequential position, you need to step aside, or you need to hold your tongue.
One country, one constitution, one destiny. Those very words are inscribed inside the Capitol, in the heart of Washington, D.C. But the United States is riven, with many Americans fearing its destiny lies in the hands of a man who has little regard for this country's constitution, whose supporters trashed this place in the dying days of his presidency. Almost 4 years after being cast out by voters, Donald Trump is back, and he has a plan to rebuild America in his own image. To some, he's a saviour, and to others, an autocrat. Over the next 2 weeks, Four Corners brings you a special series on the battle for American democracy.
As of today, I would say it's more likely than not that Trump is reelected.
This is one of those critical moments in history where actually the fate of the free world, if you will, rests on one man's shoulders.
If he's returned to the presidency, he's going to be dangerous. It can literally destroy our democracy.
I'm not sure the country will survive it, honestly.
I truly believe that we could be on the path to authoritarianism.
It's September 2018, the second year of Donald Trump's tumultuous reign. And a senior official inside his administration is about to lift the lid on a White House riddled with dysfunction and disorder.
President Trump is facing a test to his presidency unlike any faced by a modern American leader. The dilemma, which he doesn't fully grasp, is that many of the senior officials in his own administration are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. I would know. I am one of them.
What begins as a private journal soon becomes public when its author decides the American people need to know what's really happening inside the Trump administration. The highly placed official leaks his essay to the New York Times.
The root of the problem is the president's amorality. He engages in repetitive rants, and his impulsiveness results in half-baked, ill-informed, and occasionally reckless decisions that have to be walked back.
Under the byline Anonymous, the piece causes a media sensation.
We have somebody in what I call the failing New York Times.
The publication also prompts the president to order an investigation to find the identity of the author.
When you tell me about some anonymous source within the administration, probably who's failing and probably here for all the wrong reasons, an anonymous editorial, can you believe it? Anonymous, meaning gutless, a gutless editorial.
When the article came out, the anonymous article, and I read through the article, I said, wow, this guy is close enough. He really understands. He's inside the blast zone of Donald Trump.
Despite a concerted hunt for the author, Anonymous would remain just that for more than 2 years. Only after he'd resigned from the administration would he reveal his true identity.
My name is Miles Taylor. I'm anonymous. I was the chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security under Donald Trump.
Miles Taylor helped manage a workforce of 250,000 people. But his most difficult task was dealing with the whims of his commander-in-chief.
When Donald Trump was president, I remember crossing that threshold into the Oval Office. And not only was this guy not bringing his A game, he didn't have a game. He was winging it. And the place was like, I've often described it as like a crowded New York bagel shop. It was people coming in and out and him barking orders, and you might be talking about a classified issue and someone who doesn't have a security clearance comes walking through the Oval Office and he's getting phone calls and he's telling people to tweet things out.
We spend billions of dollars in other countries maintaining their borders, and we can't maintain our borders in our own country. Is there something a little bit wrong with that?
For Miles Taylor and his Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, President Trump had a singular obsession: the southern border. During one phone call with Secretary Nielsen, Trump came up with a novel solution to stop the flow of migrants coming into the United States.
And she puts the president on speakerphone, and he says that down at the border, he wants to explore what it would take to build a moat. And he goes off on this tangent talking about how we should actually get snakes and alligators and fill this 2,000-mile moat on the border with reptilian creatures so that if someone falls into the moat, they're facing the threat of snakes and alligators who might come after them. I mean, we're just laughing. You can't make this shit up.
What are you thinking
when the President of the United States is enunciating this idea?
Yeah, he's a fucking idiot. He's just a fucking idiot. I'm a lifelong conservative. I am more Republican than Donald Trump. He is not a conservative. But putting politics aside, engaging with the man, you realize he's an idiot.
Miles Taylor is like one of the nasty girls from Glee, okay? He makes himself out to be a big deal. He wasn't. Greetings, I'm Sebastian Gorka. I served as Deputy Assistant for Strategy to President Trump. I'm the host of the America First radio show in the United States.
To Donald Trump's most rusted-on supporters like Sebastian Gorka, Miles Taylor isn't a whistleblower. He's a traitor.
This is where we do the show. That is the definition of sedition. The people choose the commander-in-chief. What he says is the order of that administration. And then you say, I'm going to sabotage it. That's a crime. That's patently obvious.
So Miles Taylor, in your opinion, should be charged with sedition? Simple as that.
Utterly, yeah.
Donald Trump's list of traitors is long and includes people who served him at the highest level, including a former chief of the US military and reportedly the man who was once his most senior security official.
I'm John Bolton. I was Donald Trump's national security advisor for 17 months. He tried to put me in jail for the book that I published, tried to stop the book from coming out. I think he doesn't forget his grudges, and I think the only consolation I have is that I'm part of a very long list.
In his many security briefings with Trump, John Bolton found a president who was transactional and unfocused.
He spoke on subjects that whatever kind of came into his mind. He didn't pay attention to intelligence briefings. Frequently, he was the one doing most of the talking during the intelligence briefings. It called to mind something that Lyndon Johnson once said, "I don't learn very much when I'm talking." That didn't bother Trump at all. He had huge gaps in his knowledge of international affairs. He once asked White House Chief of Staff John Kelly if Finland were still part of Russia. It went downhill from there.
He's somebody who has no respect for intelligence or for those that collect intelligence, because he's somebody who doesn't like to be told the truth. Yes. I'm Leon Panetta, former Chief of Staff to President Clinton, former Director of the CIA, and former Secretary of Defense to President Obama.
There are few Americans who know more about the value of the US intelligence services than Leon Panetta, the CIA chief who got Osama bin Laden. He warns that a re-elected Donald Trump would present a grave threat to the security of the United States.
It won't just be the president who pays a price for stupidity. It'll be a threat to all Americans. We're facing threats from Russia, threats from China, threats from North Korea, threats from Iran, threats from terrorists. It's a dangerous world that we live in. And if a president thinks you can hide from that and not have to confront that, he'll make our country vulnerable.
I do not believe that he is capable of putting America's interests and American national security ahead of his own personal interest. I'm Pete Strzok. I was the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division during the first Trump administration, and I led the investigation into Russia's attack on the 2016 election. Trump is a counterintelligence nightmare. He had very well-known alleged proclivities for pretty women. He had any number of susceptibility to flattery, a strange sort of affection for strongmen and authoritarians that were in fact intelligence vulnerabilities.
Pete Strzok was removed from the investigation into Donald Trump and alleged Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, after it was discovered that he had disparaged the then president in private texts. In response, Trump accused the FBI veteran of treason.
Donald Trump has called you a traitor. How did that feel? It's stunning. I mean, I had never, I think I was, according to the Washington Post, I was the first person, dubious honor, that he accused of treason. Of course, treason in the United States is one of only, I think, 2 or 3 actually enumerated crimes in the Constitution, and it carries the penalty of death.
Those who fear what lies ahead under a re-elected Donald Trump point to 2 public statements he made 5 years apart to question the former president's allegiances. The first, at a summit in Helsinki in 2018, stunned the entire US intelligence community when Trump sided with Vladimir Putin on the question of Russian interference in the US election.
President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really...
Well, I remember very vividly sitting there in the front row of the audience watching this, thinking to myself, my God, what are we going to do now?
My jaw hit the floor. I mean, that is an abhorrent statement to make.
That, in my mind, was a total surrender to our greatest adversary, which is Russia. And so I'm looking at somebody who will be willing to let a tyrant do whatever he wants in the world. And that's not what America's all about.
Trump later claimed he misspoke in the press conference with Putin. But then came his second statement that shocked US lawmakers and the intelligence community, when he said this year that if re-elected, he would encourage Russia to attack NATO allies who fail to pay their way.
Well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
That is not just the stupidest statement I've heard somebody make. It also, frankly, borders on being a traitor to our country. I mean, to basically say that an enemy, an adversary like Russia, ought to be able to attack other NATO countries and that we're not going to do anything about it, I think betrays our country.
You don't pay your bills, you get no protection.
That is tantamount to inviting aggression by Russia, and you can bet that they took due note of it not only in the Kremlin, but in Beijing as well.
The NATO alliance is the most powerful military alliance in history. Forged in the wake of World War II, one of its central tenets is that signatories agree that an armed attack against one or more of them shall be considered an attack against them all.
If he carries through, as I fear he will, on his many times repeated threats to withdraw from NATO, I think it would be a catastrophic decision. The damage could be irreversible.
Russia knows that the outcome of the November election in the US will have massive repercussions for its own foreign ambitions. Most of all, its invasion of Ukraine. Donald Trump's former acting Homeland Security Secretary echoes his old boss in questioning why America has to keep paying to help Ukraine defend itself.
Overall, we'd like to see that conflict come to a conclusion one way or another. What we've seen over the last several years of the Biden administration, which is more taxpayer dollars going to that conflict without any end goal. What is the goal at the end of the day? Instead, they continue to ask American taxpayers to send our treasure, which is our funding and our taxpayer funding, overseas while we have severe challenges here at home. And I think that's when we get back to that America First approach.
If Trump were to essentially conspire with Putin to allow Ukraine to fall, he would be planting the seed for Putin moving into other democracies to try to get rid of them as well. So it's a frightening prospect.
Much has been made of Donald Trump's apparent admiration for autocrats like Vladimir Putin, Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and North Korea's Kim Jong-un.
I'm Gordon Sondland. I served as the United States ambassador to the European Union from 2018 until 2020 in the Trump administration.
Gordon Sondland believes that a re-elected Donald Trump would be no pushover when it comes to standing up to dictators and despots.
I found two Donald Trumps. I found the show that was made for public consumption, and then I found the reality of sitting in small meetings, sitting in the car with him. I remember being with President Trump shortly after he met with Kim Jong-un, and the media was excoriating him over being too friendly, over not understanding what really North Korea is all about, as if, he was seduced by this short Korean man who is a murderer and a thug. And we were in the car, and I said, Mr. President, cutting through the bullshit, tell me about Kim Jong-un. And he looked at me with a smile and he said, if that motherfucker had a knife, he could have gored me in the stomach. That told me everything I needed to know about his soberness when it came to these people.
Trump's critics warn that he not only admires dictators, but that he wants to be one.
I want to close the border, and I want to drill. That's not.
And they point to his own words when he was asked this year about what he would do if he regained the presidency.
He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, "No. Other than day one, we're closing the border, and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator."
So when he says he's a dictator for a day, he really means, look, I want to be dictator for life. I want to create a dynasty here for myself and my family, and I'm a human wrecking ball.
President Trump, he's taken this whole phony narrative about dictator, which I explained to you is going to be the furthest thing from the truth. We're trying to resurrect the last smidgens of democracy here. But, he said, tongue-in-cheek, I'll be a dictator on two issues. One is energy, but two, the border. He's going to shut the border down. We just want to save May. We're never going to save May. Very partial to Australians. Hi, I'm Paul Dans. I'm director of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project, otherwise known as Project 2025. I previously served under Donald Trump as his chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management in his first term.
This is Paul Dan's first Australian television interview. He heads a coalition of conservative groups that's planning to help Donald Trump reshape democracy and to give him more power than any other peacetime president in American history. It's known simply as Project 2025. Just to be clear, is it officially aligned or sanctioned by his campaign?
It's not officially. No, we are over 107 major organizations as a coalition coming together. So many of us did come from prior service in the Trump administration.
There's even a 920-page publicly available playbook outlining plans to transform the presidency, including to give Donald Trump unprecedented reach to take on his political enemies.
This book, this agenda, the entire Project 2025 is a plan to unite the conservative movement and the American people against elite rule and woke culture warriors.
Project 2025 accuses this ruling class of faceless civil servants and unelected mandarins of thwarting Donald Trump's first-term agenda. To the former president, it's a cancer in the heart of American government that he calls the deep state.
Either the deep state destroys America, or we destroy the deep state. That's the way it's got to be.
Now, when we came in, I didn't use the phrase deep state. I thought it was a little bit tinfoil hatty, and no, I'm not going to use that. Then I saw it. It is stunning how the unelected bureaucracy thought they had a right to blockade a man chosen by 63 million Americans to be the president. It was stunning. It's truly stunning.
They want to disband or let go tens of thousands of government employees. They've got their legions of followers believing this great paranoia that we live in a deep state society, which is, of course, a bunch of complete nonsense. I'm Anthony Scaramucci. I was an acquaintance of Donald Trump for 20 years. When he was elected as president-elect, he named me to a 16-person executive transition team. And for 11 days in the White House, in the month of July of 2017, I was his communications director.
From being a supporter and a mouthpiece for Donald Trump, Anthony Scaramucci is now one of his fiercest and most outspoken critics. He believes Project 2025, with its plan to stack the public service with an army of Trump loyalists, will propel America into a dystopian future.
These are nonsensical un-Americans. Okay, they're against the values that the society has lived by. They're going to stress the system in a way that it hasn't been stressed since the American Civil War. And it's going to be hard on the country because, we're polarized.
On Inauguration Day,
The 4 years ahead
Seems like an eternity.
it's not.
because the left has engineered our government and institutions.
To reject conservative ideology. The 2025
Project 2025 is a new paradigm in helping a conservative president be ready to govern day one. This is really an attempt by us as a movement to come together and get ready. It's a preparation.
And preparation has been underway for more than 2 years.
Our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state.
Project 2025 isn't some rabble operation. It's run by the influential and conservative Heritage Foundation.
We fight for America.
And it's already started vetting and training thousands of possible Trump appointees from across the United States.
We will succeed.
We don't want the most successful person. We want the person who keeps getting knocked down and is indefatigable. I mean, I actually think of Aussies a lot like that they're always popping up to the top and they have this kind of shit-eating grin on their face. And it's like, that is like the kind of happy warrior that we want.
And have you got people signing up? You've got recruits on the go?
Oh, yes, very much so. We have a database with over 10,000 people from all walks of life, entering into this, aspiring to serve.
What Donald Trump wants is our political stooges who will be loyal not to the office of the president, but to the person of the president and whatever his dreams or whims are. My name is Erica Newland. I was an attorney at the Department of Justice under Donald Trump, and now I work for Protect Democracy, where I try to protect our country from the authoritarian threat.
Erica Newland has investigated Project 2025, and she says it will deliver Trump a band of loyalists eager to carry out his agenda.
What sort of questions do they ask potential appointees?
Here, let me read you a few of those questions. They ask them to weigh in on whether the president should be able to advance his or her agenda through the bureaucracy without hindrance from unelected federal officials. And that's a dog whistle, of course. And then they ask whether you agree that the federal government should recognize only two unchanging sexes, male and female, as a matter of policy.
So what do those sort of questions say to you about the sort of people that Project 2025 wants to recruit?
They want people who are unswervingly loyal to the Trump agenda, to his vision, and to him as a person, as well as to his and the movement's goal of subordinating those who don't look or sound like them.
And what will be left will be the grifters and the sycophants. Whatever his worst impulse is of the day, they will facilitate it and will enable it. Hi, I'm former Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania's 15th Congressional District. I served nearly 14 years in the Congress, 7 terms, and I did have a few run-ins with our former President Donald Trump.
Charlie Dent was one of the few Republicans in Congress who stood up to Trump as president.
I'm afraid if Trump were to win in 2024, those types of people, those adults, those people who would try to, put some checks and restrain the worst impulses on the president won't be there.
The central principle behind many of Project 2025's policies is that a democratically elected president is the American people's proxy, meaning it's the job of the thousands of unelected civil servants to carry out Trump's orders, without question.
The great challenge confronting a Conservative president is the boldness to bend or break the bureaucracy to the presidential will.
You do have the First Amendment, but you can't encourage people to do acts that are in contravention of the Constitution. You can't come into administration and then sabotage the things the man elected by the people has said we will do.
What we saw during the Trump administration is you saw career officials disagreeing with the president. Disagreeing in the sense, and even going so far as to say, I'm going to disrupt or sabotage your agenda. I'm just looking at you? Yeah. Okay. I'm Chad Wolf. I'm the former acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under President Trump. I'm the current executive director of the America First Policy Institute.
Former Cabinet Secretary Chad Wolf remains a Trump loyalist and is ready to serve once again if his old boss wins in November. The America First Policy Institute he now leads is full of pro-Trump populists who all share Project 2025's vision of a civil service stacked with true believers. To achieve this, they're proposing a re-elected Donald Trump brings in what's called Schedule F, an executive order that would allow the president to fire people at will.
And the idea with Schedule F is very, very simple, which is if you're in a policy-making role and you're working against the president, we have the ability to remove you because that's how it should be, right?
After a campaign was launched by the Democrats warning of the dangers of Project 2025 to democracy, Donald Trump tried to distance himself from the group, insisting he knows nothing about it, despite reports his campaign has been briefed by its officials.
Have you spoken with President Trump? Do you have a relationship with him?
Well, sure. In my personal capacity, I'm a Trump supporter and have been down in Mar-a-Lago many times. But we have integration with folks on the campaign. The reality is, yes, we often supply ideas and ultimately we hope to offer personal suggestions. This is really going to be the engine room for the next administration. Many of these folks served and will be called upon to serve again, and I know President Trump's team will be receptive of it.
And Donald Trump will need an army of true believers if he's to implement his agenda.
We will reverse the Biden ban on natural gas exports. We're going to drill, baby, drill. That's what we're going to do. We're going to drill, baby. We'll drill, baby. Thank you very much. I will pass landmark legislation. If India, China, or any other country hits us with a 100 or 200% tariff on American-made goods, we will hit them with the same exact tariff. On day one, I will sign a new executive order to cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto our children.
But Trump isn't just vowing to shake up policy. He's also promising to settle scores.
I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
In Donald Trump's mind, there is no bigger target for retribution than the very agency that administers and enforces the law in the United States. And he's vowing to dismantle this key pillar of democracy, the US Department of Justice.
It's hard to find the most problematic agencies, but I think you'd have to put DOJ at the top. the reality is that agency is one of the key extensions of the deep state.
So when I came in and I realized the deep state is real, I realized of all of these agencies and departments, the DOJ is the worst. The DOJ is a viper's nest of politically motivated individuals who see it as their fiefdom to serve the Democrat Party and their buddies.
We will completely overhaul the corrupt Department of Injustice to clear out all the communists who have weaponized government activities.
Erica Newland says she's seen the weaponisation of the Justice Department already. As a lawyer in Trump's first term, her team worked to make sure his presidential executive orders were legal. The office handled orders like the so-called Muslim ban and the building of a wall along the border with Mexico.
That was extremely hard. I was helping an administration, a president, who did not have any concept of democracy, who did not have any respect for the law.
Trump's supporters accused the DOJ of targeting the former president with bogus investigations and of stymieing both his first-term agenda and his bid for re-election.
Donald Trump has promised that if he becomes president again, he would harness the Department of Justice to go after the people he perceives as political enemies or as somehow disloyal.
I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family.
And then there's the long list of those he is accused of treason.
We've talked about Trump pursuing his enemies. One of those he wants retribution against is the sitting president, Joe Biden. He said he will appoint a special prosecutor to go after Joe Biden. Do you think he'll come after you as well?
I think there's a chance of that. Nobody can accurately say how far Donald Trump would be willing to go after his enemies and what he'd be willing to do to them.
Donald Trump is an authoritarian threat to this country. There's a playbook that authoritarians use. They aggrandize executive authority. They politicize independent institutions. They quash dissent. They spread misinformation. They target vulnerable communities. They corrupt elections, and they stoke violence. Donald Trump has engaged in all 7 of these.
The former president has also hinted he would ignore America's most sacred document, the Constitution.
Do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner? Or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution.
He said, his words, that he intends to terminate parts of the Constitution. He didn't say which parts. He said he's going to be a dictator, and then he said day one. What does that even mean? The Constitution does not provide for that. I'm Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. I represent the 18th Congressional District in California. I served as a manager for the first Trump impeachment, and I served as a member of the January 6th committee that uncovered the fact that Trump was at the center of a wide-ranging conspiracy to overturn the American government.
Veteran Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren says it would be folly to brush off Donald Trump's apocalyptic rhetoric as hyperbole or showmanship.
He said that he plans to send the military out into the country to round up people, I guess, who look like immigrants and put them in camps. So it's a shocking proposal. But one of the things I learned serving on the January 6th committee is to take Trump at his word, because he does mean to do what he says.
The Democrats say, please don't call them animals, they're humans. I said, no, they're not humans. They're not humans, they're animals.
One message that Donald Trump repeats over and over is the danger posed by undocumented migrants coming over the US southern border.
I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country.
It has become a rallying cry of his presidential campaign.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world. They're pouring into our country.
Well, you know, poisoning the blood, that's a Hitler-esque statement.
But the man who was in charge of the border under Donald Trump defends the former president's rhetoric and says he's merely tapping into a deep fear about the type of people crossing into the United States.
When you see the public safety threats and the national security threats coming across that border, you see gang members from Venezuela. These are all individuals that ICE and Border Patrol pick up on a daily basis. These are bad individuals.
We are the only developed nation in the world that has no borders. I mean, these numbers are quite, for normal countries, these numbers are hard to ingest.
But how is it poisoning the blood of the country? I want to understand that.
Well, many ways. Fentanyl, because of Biden's border policies poisoning literally the blood of our nation. 110,000 Americans died of drug overdoses and fentanyl. I mean, just think of that for a second.
The number of undocumented migrants coming over the southern border has surged under Joe Biden. According to government figures, of the nearly 8 million people stopped at the border in the last few years, around 100,000, or just over 1%, were convicted criminals.
When I return to the White House, we will stop the plunder, rape, slaughter, and destruction of the American suburbs, cities, and towns. We'll stop the invasion on our southern border and begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history.
And this is sort of stuff that I find repulsive. When you're talking about deporting 15 million citizens, I mean, who the hell are you? And even if they're not citizens, even if they're illegal, are you going to run around the country in some armored car like we're in The Handmaid's Tale?
He said very clearly, I want to engage in the biggest mass deportation program in American history. How do you even begin to put forward a program and enact it?
Well, I think it's interesting. Let's talk about deportations a little bit, because I think those on the left hear that and say, oh my God, that sounds terrible. I don't understand how that sounds terrible. The idea of deporting individuals, removing individuals, or repatriating individuals that, again, don't have a legal right to be here, or perhaps are here because the law has been abused to get them here, they need to be removed from the country.
Donald Trump's rhetoric in the lead up to this election has invoked bloodbaths and bedlam. He's spoken of retribution and revenge, and he's promised to dismantle and destroy. Having been here for a while, I get the very real sense that the shock and the violence of Trump's language has worn off for many Americans. But to those who know the man, there's a very real fear that a re-elected Donald Trump could just deliver on what he says.
Donald Trump knows how to invoke emotions in people. He knows how to trigger that dark side of the human spirit. My name is Temidaya Ganga Williams, and I served as Senior Investigative Counsel on the House January 6th Committee, which investigated the facts and causes surrounding the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
Insanity! They broke through, it's on! You better run, cops!
The 6th of January 2021 marked the lowest point of Donald Trump's chaotic presidency. Refusing to accept his defeat at the hands of Joe Biden, Trump told his supporters to march on the US Capitol.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Leading up to the attack, he had knowingly lied about the election. Donald Trump did not think he won the election. He, in fact, knew he lost the election, and he told people in his close circle that he had lost the election. So what he did instead, rather than accept the result, is that he fed lies to his supporters day in and day out, and he basically whipped them up into a frenzy.
There's a gun! There's a gun! There's a gun! Oh! Holy shit!
At least 5 people died in the attack. while more than 140 police officers were injured.
Rubber bullets everywhere.
Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren was in the Capitol building as the mob surged in.
I think we came very close to the vice president being killed and probably members of Congress being killed. The rioters have made it clear that's what they intended to do. We came very close to an actual overturn of the government. And clearly that's, Trump celebrates that.
Donald Trump denies inciting the January 6 riot and describes the House committee investigation as a witch hunt. But after the attack on the Capitol, many of Trump's closest confidants deserted him, believing he would never again be a political force. Now, even those like Gordon Sondland, who served Trump, who was fired by Trump, who even testified against Trump, and who said he could never forgive him over January 6, are coming back into the fold.
Many people are agonizing over this choice. And do you forgive Donald Trump for what he did on January 6th and vote for him, knowing that for 4 years the country was in fairly decent shape?
So you're voting for Trump?
Absolutely.
The man you could never forgive.
Exactly. That's why it's such an agonizing decision. And I hope he learned his lesson from January 6th.
In the lead-up to this November's election, Donald Trump has repeatedly promised that he would use his presidential powers to pardon hundreds of people convicted over the Capitol riot.
We will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons.
So you believe they're hostages like President Trump?
Absolute political prisoners, utterly.
And you agree with the pardoning of them? If
anyone who didn't, hit a policeman or, break through the doors, utterly, completely full and unconditional pardon, absolutely.
Emboldening the former president even further was a Supreme Court ruling this month that Donald Trump has broad immunity from prosecution for official acts carried out in his role as president. In a dissenting opinion, one justice warned that the president is now a king above the law. The decision almost certainly means Donald Trump will not go to trial on charges of subverting the 2020 election before this November's poll.
If the case is unresolved, he could direct Department of Justice to not proceed with the charges. The new Attorney General could order that and could dissolve the investigation. And I think it makes the election its own kind of jury, because I think the American people will have to make a determination as to his culpability without the benefit of a jury going first.
Hello, welcome back.
Hey, you had to change. It was Skype now 2D.
Well, that's good. We can talk about Iran with him.
What seems certain is that the next heads of crucial departments that oversee the treatment of immigrants or insurrectionists will be chosen by Donald Trump's most trusted allies.
His article was strange.
That could very well include Sebastian Gorka, who's already spoken to Trump about a possible role.
I said to him, sir, most exciting for me would be national security, but the most important would be personnel. We know who the real Trump supporters are, who America First are. The John Boltons who were brought in and then can't wait now to go on CNN to slag off the president. The John Boltons of the world will not be inside the building now. But it is the most important thing. God willing, if we win, personnel, personnel, personnel.
Doesn't the president, though, if it's Donald Trump or whoever, need people in there who will challenge his view and sometimes say, no, Mr. President?
This isn't this is not a question of yes men. This is not having subversives.
In his inaugural speech in 2017,
Please raise your right hand.
the newly elected President Donald Trump vowed to end what he called American carnage.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my...
Instead, his reign brought American democracy to the brink. Many believe that if Donald Trump once again wins office, he will push the United States over the precipice.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Donald Trump does not believe in the Constitution. He does not believe in the rule of law. He does not believe in free and fair elections. He's a liar, and he doesn't believe in America as a world leader. I think that's what will decide the next election.
You go back and read the writings of the Founding Fathers, they designed the system to elect the President of the United States as a system to weed out nefarious individuals. Donald Trump comes into the presidency intent on detonating those guardrails, he's probably going to be successful.
He's their great white hope or their great orange hope. He is the orange wrecking ball that can smash into these institutions that they feel have been unfair to them. He's an avatar for their anger, and they'll stay with him no matter what. He said once that he could shoot people on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose a sliver of support. He's right.
What do you say about the potential return of Donald Trump? What do you say to your fellow Americans? What it would mean for the United States, its institutions, and of course its democracy?
I'm not sure the country will survive it, honestly. If he really does intend to do the things that he says, we would not have the kind of democratic republic that we've enjoyed for over 200 years.
And now that shots have been fired, there are fears that the great American experiment in democracy could give way to a surge in political violence.
The fear I have is that no matter what the candidates do, there are going to be people in this country who are going to be very unhappy. And that's why I worry about civil disorder. I'm not saying civil war, I'm saying civil disorder. That there could be, some kind of, violent acts that, would be really problematic for the country.
I think we're building a city on a hill. I think this is going to be a great culmination of our 250th birthday and the President Trump in office really being that beacon of democracy across the entire world. This is the greatest experiment in human history for advancing bounty and freedom across the globe.
He's a former president who led an armed rebellion against his own country. An armed rebellion that, if it had succeeded, would have resulted in the murder of sitting senators and members of Congress, and potentially the murder of his own vice president. And I think we have to talk about the threat in those terms. So he's already effectively taken up arms against his own nation. The question is whether the American people are going to put him in a position of power again to finish the job. That's the real question.
Next time on Four Corners, the big issues dominating voters' minds.
So they're heading for the end of the fence, over?
Affirmative.
So the wall goes this way for about 35 miles, and it ended here.
Stop the invasion. This is an invasion.
I've been a minority my whole life. All they want is respect.
We've been called murderers, baby killers.
I'm being indicted for you, the black population.
It's offensive. As a black man, that is absolutely offensive.
Black men find it relatively admirable.
There are fears that once again the election result will spark threats and violence.
You're gonna be served lead, you fucking enemy communist. Classy shirts for classy ladies. Fuck Joe Biden! Fuck Joe Biden!
If we don't win this time, America is gone. America is gone.